Next up is the lab mission, and as you would have seen before in Max's second mission, the lab missions are optional missions. There's one for each continent, and you unlock them by capturing a specific property in one of the earlier missions. Now, normally lab missions are optional, but in this case, the lab one is compulsory. And the reason is, for the purposes of the tutorial, there's one rather important thing that we haven't covered yet. And it'll be pretty obvious as soon as you see the map. Yes, this is the tutorial for Fog of War. So, basically, yes, fog missions play very differently to normal ones. You won't be able to see most of the map, and you'll have to rely on your unit's vision ranges, which means certain units are more useful than others, and some need to be used quite differently. Particularly indirect units. That thing Nell just said there, that means you can't actually tell who controls a property unless it's within your vision range. That's one of the other things about fog. And as Nell's explaining now, recon units have certain benefits in fog, mainly that they have a very large vision range, which means I mentioned recons earlier on as units that are good for offense in the early game but are weak later on. In fog, recons are pretty good even in the late game, but you generally want to hide them, because if they're spotted, then they won't last very long. Yeah, if you run into an enemy unit while you're moving that you can't see, your unit will be forced to do nothing for that turn. And here we have the explanation of this. Yes, infantry get an increase in vision by climbing mountains, which as you can see here is pretty substantial, which means that infantry are very important. Also mechs in particular are quite important too, because mountains don't have as high a movement cost for them. Hiding recon units in woods is always a good idea. Now yeah, Nell explained in the tutorial about woods. Days of Ruin uses the term hiding spaces, and I'm going to use that too in this playthrough. Although in this game there are only two types of terrain that are classed as hiding spaces. Basically, in these types of terrain, you can't be seen unless the enemy is right next to you. This is particularly important in the campaign because something that the game doesn't tell you is the AI is not affected by fog. They can see everywhere. So you can't try and use vision ranges of the enemy to your advantage. They will be able to see you unless you're in a hiding space. And that's quite useful in, well, some later missions. Yeah, see, of course now, a normal human player would not be able to see my anti-air unit there, but of course the AI can. And another thing about lab missions, they're all timed. In this case, the timer isn't much of a problem at all, but in the later lab missions, it gets really quite annoying. And that thing Sammy mentioned, yes, there's an indirect unit hiding in one of those three woods. Unfortunately, when I recorded this, I haven't played this mission in a while, so I kind of forgot which one it was. So that meant it took a bit of trial and error. Rather painful trial and error in which, if you get it wrong, you get shot at by artillery. Yeah, now, indirect units like rockets are used quite differently in fog. They, in most cases, apart from anti-air missiles, which have a very high vision range, But other than that, they tend to have a vision range of 1, which means they require other units to act as bosses for them. I find infantry or mechs on mountains are really good for this, in general. There's a certain mission coming up in the next continent that will require a lot of use of that tactic. And infantry with no defense boosts versus medium tank equals bye-bye infantry. Now time just to finish this off. And in the next part, we will begin our advance on the lab. The lab is pretty much a headquarters. You win if you capture it, but the only difference being that it provides less of a defense bonus.